We'll start with the Caffeinate Me application that we've been using in the previous exercises. If you want to follow along, just check out the Lesson 11 Start tag in the Caffeinate Me project. Rather than having a flat directory structure, we want to use a layered one, a nested one, with capabilities at the top level and features underneath. In Serenity, we do this by creating nested directories underneath the features directory. The first one will be order coffee remotely. So let's add that directory as a subdirectory of our features folder. Next, we want to add just-in-time coffees. And then we'll do the same thing for optimize stocks. Once we have our directory structure, we can go through our features and place them inside the corresponding capability folder, like this. Ask for receipt, complete order, place an order, and view pending orders all belong in the order coffee remotely capability. Prioritize orders goes in the just-in-time capability. And view order history stats, well, that one goes in the optimized stocks. Now let's run our reports and see what the results look like. We can generate the full site by running maven clean verify. We could do this in Gradle as well by running Gradle test or Gradle aggregate to generate the reports. Once the reports have been generated, we open them in. Here I'm opening it from the command line, and we need to go to the target site Serenity directory as usual. Now let's go to the Requirements tab, and you can see now we don't have features anymore, we have capabilities, and we have those capabilities that we defined. Those names come from our directory structures. When we go into a capability, we can see the features that are contained by that capability. And if we go into a feature, then of course we can see the full details of the feature. This is exactly the same as we had beforehand. Living documentation is all about describing how an application behaves, so it's good to make the documentation quite descriptive, just like you would in a user manual. The acceptance criteria tell you how you know whether a feature works, but it's often useful to add some extra background or context to the feature. One good place you can add this is up here in the narrative text, which appears in the feature file itself. This text can actually contain any text you like, though it is very common to see the format that you can see here, in order to, as a I want, or sometimes the more traditional format of as a I want so that. But you can add extra details. For example, we might add something here like Caffeinate Me customers like their coffee hot. Now let's run this report and see what it generates. Now when we refresh this page, we can see the new text that we added. We can put extra details in a feature file, but we also need to be able to describe a capability or even the application as a whole. We can do this using overview files. Overview files are simple markdown formatted text files that we call overview.md that you place in a capability directory or in the features directory if you want to describe the whole application. Let's try it out. I'm going to add a simple markdown text here. Caffeinate Me will revolutionize the lives of coffee lovers everywhere. Now let's run the tests again and see what happens. If we go to the requirements page, we can see our summary text right at the top. Obviously, this is a very simple text, and in a real application, you would probably put a lot more detail here. have a go at adding some markdown text to your own version. Generate the reports and see what it looks like. We can also add overview files to the capabilities. Let's add an overview file to the Order Coffee Remotely capability and see what it looks like. We simply create a file, once again called overview.md, but this time we create it inside the capability directory. We can put any text we like here. Again, we can use Markdown for highlighting. Often, we'll put a short description of what this capability is about and why we think it will deliver value. For example, for the Order Coffee Remotely capability, we could say something like this. We think that allowing our regular customers to order coffees ahead of time and avoid waiting in a queue will increase sales to regular customers. We'll know that this is a success if we manage to increase our coffee sales to regular customers by 5%. Once we've saved this file, we can go and generate the reports again, and we can see that this text now appears on the corresponding capability page. We can even add images to the overview files. Any file in the resources/assets folder will be automatically copied to the target/site/Serenity directory when we generate the reports. And we can refer to this assets folder from within our Markdown. This is a great way to include architecture or flow diagrams or other illustrations that we think might give users a better idea of what our application does. In our Caffeinate Me project, we have an asset folder that contains a very basic image representing the general concept of our application. You can see it here. Now, if we want to make this image appear in our living documentation, all we need to do is to add the Markdown image notation that looks a little bit like this. There's exclamation mark, square brackets, which gives you the name of the image that will appear if you hover over it, and then the path in parentheses. See here how we're referring to the assets directory, assets/caffeinateme.png. And this will be copied into the target site Serenity directory so that when we read the report, the image will appear correctly. Now, when we generate our report, we can see the image appears on the front page of the requirements. By default, Serenity with Cucumber will produce a requirements hierarchy of capabilities and features. If we have 3 layers, it will be themes, capabilities, and features. If you want to change this, you can use the Serenity requirement type property. Let's see how this works. First of all, we need a serenity.properties file. You may already have one in your own projects. This file contains configuration properties that let you customize many aspects of the Serenity reports and behavior. Next, we add the Serenity requirements type property, and we list the requirements hierarchy that we want. In this case, where we want epic followed by feature. Now, when we generate the reports, we will have epics and features rather than capabilities and features. Now, since we are using Cucumber, the only limitation here is that because we're using feature files, the bottom level must always be features. This is actually intentional, as user stories are not actually designed to be part of the living documentation. Many teams even throw the user stories away once they've completed their features. You see, a set of user stories describes how you break down a feature into smaller slices so that you can build it more easily and get quicker feedback at each stage. At the end of the day, users are actually more interested in features than user stories, because a feature describes what the application can help them do, whereas a user story is more about how we planned to build the feature. For example, being able to pay for my coffee online would be a feature, but when we build this feature, We might break it down into smaller stories where each story represents a different payment type. Payment via credit card, payment via PayPal, and so on. A good way to think of this is to ask yourself, would this requirement appear as a chapter or a section heading in the user manual? If it would, chances are it's a feature. In this lesson, we covered some key aspects of how to organize your Cucumber feature files to produce more effective living documentation. We saw how to use a directory structure to organize your feature files into capabilities or into some other organization. And we saw how you could tailor this organization to suit your project and your team by giving different names for each requirement level. We also saw how you can use overview markdown files to describe what the higher level requirements are about in more detail, and to turn your feature reports into real living documentation that can be useful both within and outside of your team. Many high-performing teams take a lot of care to make sure their living documentation is really readable and effective, and you should too. It really is a great way to save time for the whole team in the long term.